Today on SteamPunk Minecraft, the Cake Factory. I don't believe there's a single person on this planet who doesn't love cake. Join me as we bake them from scratch. I hope you guys brought your appetites. From farm to oven, we're automating all the cakes we can eat. This is episode 8 of SteamPunk Minecraft. The holidays are right around the corner, and if you haven't gotten gifts by now, then you're gonna want to hear this. The ultimate gift idea for the little ones in your family. I'm talking about today's sponsor, CodeMonkey, an award-winning product that teaches kids the basics of coding and then some. Don't get them video games, show them that they can make their own. They already spend so much time on screens, why not turn some of that screen time into something productive, not to mention downright valuable? They'll learn how to code and have fun doing it, because each course is its own game. And that's the best part. CodeMonkey makes learning fun. They'll take on fun puzzles and other activities that'll keep them busy for hours. But CodeMonkey is not just for kids. When it comes to the older ones, CodeMonkey's got something for them too. They teach Python, game development. I mean, come on, what gamer hasn't thought about making their own game? They even provide lessons on text-based coding, so they can start programming like the pros. But CodeMonkey's value extends beyond programming. Their lessons nurture problem-solving skills, logic, and creativity, core aspects of life that all people need to be set for success. Coding is a great skill to have, and like a language, the earlier you learn it, the easier it is to grasp. And above all else, such skills open opportunities, build confidence, not to mention the skill pays well. Like I said, the holidays are coming up, so if you're struggling to come up with gift ideas, why not give this a try? Use the promo code to get 25% off any paid home plan. Give it to your kid. Don't have a kid? Give it to your siblings, your cousins, nieces, nephews, neighbors even. If they can use a computer, then CodeMonkey is right for them. We all want what's best for the little ones in our lives. This holiday, set them up for success. Give them the gift they deserve, a head start that begins with CodeMonkey. Link in the description below. I have a sweet tooth, so to satisfy my cravings, I'm gonna bake a cake. And thanks to the Create mod, we can automate a process so that we can have all the cake we want. To bake our cake, we're gonna need eggs, sugar, and dough. I'm gonna start off with the eggs. The first thing I did was craft some cages because I was gonna go capture some chickens. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any chickens, but I did find emus. On the bright side is that they laid eggs. As for the downside, well, they weren't gonna fit in the cage. Luckily, I came prepared. I just so happened to have some leads on me, and with the help of said leads, I was able to wrangle up all the emus I needed. I hopped back into my mech suit and walked all the way back to the base, and these emus, they are stubborn. I tied them up next to a utility pole and left them there until I needed them for later. One thing I forgot to mention is that you also need milk. Now you could make milk, but real connoisseurs enjoy milk that comes straight from the source. In this case, that was gonna be goats. Why? Because I couldn't find a single cow. Plus, they look like they need a loving home. I mean, look at that one, he's missing a horn. Now, I've never had goat milk in real life, and to be honest, I'm something of a picky eater, so I don't know if I would try it. But if I did, you know what, no, there is no if. I'm not drinking it. But for today's purposes, it's gonna do just fine. I took the goats back to town and I tied them up. Then I left them there to go prepare the build site for the new cake factory. Don't worry, friends, I'll be back for you later. I decided that the best spot for this factory was gonna be right behind my house. I mean, come on, don't you think a factory would look awesome here? There were way too many trees. I just hate that they grow wherever they want. After that, I used the old water bucket technique to clear all the grass. Once I was able to clear enough away, it was finally time to start laying the outline for the building itself. But first I had to prep the road that would lead to the factory, which meant I had to destroy the rose garden. After that, I began placing logs, because it was in these logs where I would start growing my wheat to make the dough. I prepped the side of the future farm, and then I had to go back to the workshop to create a new crafting station. You guys remember the carpenter's table, right? It was a special tool that we used to get different textures on wooden blocks. Well, there was also a mason's table, and for that one we got different textures on stone-based blocks. This is just what we needed, because our building was going to be made out of granite. I took the table back to the factory, placed it down and began browsing the large catalog of potential textures. In this case, I was going to turn the granite into these tiny little bricks. I then placed them on the outline, and after that, I began placing glass for the base of the windows. I then had to go to the wood farm and gather as many logs as I could, because frankly, I had run out of space, I needed to use them, so instead of making slabs, I just decided to use the wood itself to make up the entire floor. It took some time, and I placed tons of wooden blocks, but eventually I was able to fill up the entire floor, and after that, I used my axe, I stripped the logs, and well, there you go. I then began making these beams, but more on that later. You see that? That's flour. And when you wash flour with water, it turns into dough. And that was exactly what we needed. And all dough begins with a good farm. In this case, it was going to be an automatic wheat farm. I used a design that was almost identical to the hemp farm from the previous episode. Deployers would plant the seeds and harvesters would gather all the wheat once it's matured. I went to each deployer, adding seeds as its filter, and then after that, I manually placed the seeds in each deployer's hand. That looks good. That's right, friends. Our cake making process was going to start right here on this little patch of dirt. As for the power source of our factory, I was going to use another steam engine. After seeing how useful they could be in the last episode, I decided, hey, why not have one dedicated engine for every building? I had to set up the pipework to make sure that the steam engine was constantly supplied with water. After that, I added the heat source underneath, that being campfires, and once everything came together, it was powered on and we got rotational force. I added a rotational speed controller to modulate the speed, extra fast. After all, there's nothing worse than waiting for cake. There it is, the power source of our factory. Eventually the wheat had grown, but the mechanical harvester wasn't doing its job. Something was wrong, so I had to stop the machine. I then had to dismantle it and rebuild it because it turns out that the harvesters had to harvest the bottom half of the wheat, not the top half. I glued it all together, ran it again, and this time it was doing its job. The next step was to lay out conveyor belts, chests, funnels, chutes, anything to get the materials where we needed them to go. I even included a waste disposal system so that we can get rid of the unnecessary items like seeds. I then added a catwalk around the machines for easy access. That way I could see what was going on. When it comes to create mod builds, you want to keep a close eye on everything you're working on. One wrong thing could mess up the entire system. The next step was to prep a giant tank where we were going to store our milk. I then had to design a system that could cycle buckets. It would be a design that was similar to that of our lava farm. But instead of lava and nether portals, we were going to be using goats and milk. It was going to be a slow process, but eventually that thing would get filled. The next animals to deal with were the emus, who were patiently waiting for me. And just like before, they were still extremely stubborn. I had to walk them all the way to the factory, and then I tied them up. I then began placing 9 chutes where the eggs would drop through once the emus laid them. I layered the chutes with carpet, and then I went underneath to create the conveyor belt system that would get the eggs where they needed to be. Now here's what I love about chutes. You can actually link them together so that the items can fall diagonally. I set up the conveyor belt, linked everything together, and then I prepped the chest with a funnel, that way when the eggs fell through, they would be stored. Shortly after, I ran for my life because I had gone multiple nights without sleeping, and the phantoms, they wanted to tuck me in. The next morning was an absolute pain because I had to get the emus inside of their little section. They did not want to cooperate. Getting them up the stairs was hard enough, but getting them in the box? Well, by this point they were agitated and they were actually attacking me. It took a long time, and I mean a really long time, but eventually I was able to trap the emus behind the glass. I then noticed something strange on my map. There were a bunch of horses, and they were all just standing in a line. I had no idea what this could mean, but it was worth exploring. I walked out of the factory and approached what looked like a giant crack in the ground. Now this wasn't a ravine, it was too small, but I'll tell you what it was. It was the perfect horse prison, because for some reason all of them were gathered here. I don't know how they all got trapped in here, but I did find something interesting when exploring this little trap. There were mules, and the mules were loaded with loot. They had food, they had emeralds, they had all the things I wanted. It was all mine for the taking. I gathered as much as I could carry. After that, I crawled out of that ravine and made my way back to the place so I could unload my inventory because I was just carrying way too much food. But my main reason for being at the workshop was to gather some sugarcane. I disabled the automatic harvester, and then I began prepping a platform. Now this platform was going to be crucial to making our cake. I added stairs and trap doors because for something this crucial, it had to look nice. I then built a layer of dirt. Reason being, because on this second layer, I was going to be growing lots of sugarcane. But the first side down, I then began working on the second side, and after that I began punching holes through the dirt to make sure that I had the optimal water placement. After all, there wasn't a lot of room to grow this, so I wanted to make sure I was taking advantage of all the space I could. With that water, I took it up to the platform and began filling in the holes. Now, I was following a chart on Google Images that showed me the best way to plant sugarcane, but I don't think I did it right. Regardless, it was planted. And after that, I had to upgrade the harvester. This one was connected to the main one below. I then began to glue all the pieces together. Gluing is so annoying. Once all the blocks were fused with the glue, I went down to the lower level, switched on the harvester, and in sync, the sugarcane and the wheat was being harvested at the same time. I then set up a sorting system for the sugarcane where it would go into the chests and be grounded in a millstone, being converted into sugar. I was one step closer to making a cake. We had the eggs, we had the dough, now we had the sugar. All we had to do was mix it all together to make our cake base. And to do that, I had to tear up my beautiful wooden floors to dig a hole. Now, why did I need to do this? Well, I was going to have a series of conveyor belts that would take the items from one end of the factory to the other, in this case that center point being a basin. It was in this basin where all the ingredients would come together. I added chutes on every side so that they could go in. I then tossed some of the ingredients in where they would be smashed to make our first cake base, an item that I would use to set a filter on the basin. After that, it was simply a matter of setting everything free. The conveyor belts would move the items in, they would be pressed, and we were automatically making our cake base. But the cake base was raw and needed to be baked. So I installed a fan with a campfire right above it to blow hot air, and that would bake our raw cake base. Within a matter of seconds, we would have a piping hot cake. The only thing left to do now was to frost it, and this is where the milk would come into play. But first I had to build a front room. I would divide the building into two rooms, with the factory being in the back, and the front would act as like a type of shop. I built the wall out of leftover wood logs that I had for making the floor, and then I layered it with granite. And shortly after, I began prepping the assembly line where the cakes would come out from the back end of the factory. Now this next edition was inspired by a really popular donut chain. Inside of their dining rooms, they have this massive glass window that you can actually peek through. And on the other side of the window is the kitchen where they make the donuts. That's exactly what I'm making here. I cut a giant hole in the wall, perfect for fitting in a beautiful glass window that will provide people a vantage point to see the factory and all the cakes being made. After that, I connected the last mechanical belt, and like that, everything was finally running in sync. As for the milk, I would be able to transport it via pipe. It would lead to the front, and as you can see there are three, the first one being real and the other two just being for show. I then attached valves to each pipe. And if you don't know what a valve is, it's basically a wheel that's used to turn the pipes on or off. And I had three of them colored, one for vanilla, one for chocolate, and one for strawberry. And that's what it looks like when you spin the valve. I next had to install a deployer with a knife because cakes don't stack, but if you slice them, they do. I placed down a chest, and then after that I had to set up the deployer, which was not in the right position like always, but thanks to my wrench I was able to fix it up, I gave it a knife, and it was now ready to slice cake. As for the milk, it was flowing from the tank to the spout. All I had to do was turn the valve and let the milk flow through. I threw a cake on the belt just to test it out, but it stopped moving. I guess even though the spout's empty, the cake's not going to move until something's put on it, so I ended up having to break the spouts. And that's too bad too, because I really liked the way they looked. Anyways, I threw the cake back onto the belt for round 2, and this time, the milk was deposited right onto the cake, and it was iced up and ready to slice. As for the cake, for something made out of emu eggs and goat milk, it wasn't half bad. The cakes even gave me the speed effect. Well, you saw me build it, now it's time for you to see how it works. It all begins here at the wheat farm, where the automatic harvester collects the wheat once it matures. Up on the second level, we have sugarcane being collected. Both the wheat and the sugarcane are deposited onto the assembly line via portable storage interface. After that, they only have 2 places to go. Let's start with the wheat. Leaving the portable storage interface, the wheat goes onto the assembly line and enters one of 2 funnels. And as for other excess items such as seeds, they enter a 3rd funnel, which acts as a garbage disposal. The wheat that enters the funnels is ground up into flour inside a pair of millstones. Once the flour is ready, it exits the millstones via chute. After that, it enters a series of chests, where it accumulates and comes out in stacks of 16. The stack moves up the assembly line, and then it goes over a water fan, where it's washed and turned into dough. And once the dough's ready, it enters another funnel, where it's then stored into a chest until further use. Back at the beginning, the sugarcane is entering a shorter process. It enters a chest, where it's then moved to a millstone. It's ground up into sugar, and that's about it. The next process is even more simple, this having to do with emu eggs. Anyways, the emus lay eggs and they go down the chutes. The eggs, coming straight from the upper level, are deposited onto the conveyor belt. After that, they enter the chest and then go down another chute where they're carried all the way to the basin. I finally had my sugar. I finally had my eggs. When all of the ingredients enter the basin, the mechanical press is activated. It squishes them all together to form a cake base. They then go over the fire and get baked into a nice toasty cake. The cakes then go onto the assembly line once again, and they move all the way to the front room, where they patiently wait at the spout to be frosted by the milk. Speaking of the milk, it all begins here with our trusty milk and go. The bucket then goes over a fluid drain where the milk is dumped, and after that it goes into a chest where it drops down below. The bucket is then blown up by a fan through a series of chutes. Once it reaches the top, it goes into another chest where it's then deposited into the deployer once again, where it clicks the goat with milk, beginning the cycle all over. Now we've come to the very end. All that's left is for the cake to get frosted, and once that happens, it then moves down, and it's sliced by the knife. I think it's safe to say that this cake factory is a complete success. Look at that beautiful parade of cakes ready to be eaten. I'm gonna have to be honest with you guys. We've made a lot of things with this Create mod, but this one right here, this factory is by far my favorite thing we've made. All that's left to do now is to build the walls and fill in the windows with glass. It took a while, but eventually I was able to raise the walls with the granite I collected, and I even made a roof out of andesite. Now this place does look like any other factory, so I do have to add a special sign so you know this is a cake factory. I hope that my little build here on the roof is going to get the point across of what this place actually is. And if you haven't guessed already, sorry for the spoiler, it's a cake. Hope you guys like the design because I am not the best when it comes to pixel art. There it is, the sign in all of its glory. But I had to build one more thing just in case even that wasn't enough. Up on the roof, I ended up building a giant cupcake. I recently saw the FNAF movie and I pasted off of the cupcake that Chica holds. Looking back on things, we have definitely added a lot to the SteamPunk world. The skyline is really coming together. Well, that's gonna wrap up today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked today's video, be sure to leave a comment down below, share with your friends, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Doublesal. Have a great day.